Hi there, my name is Brooke Schaefer. I'm an intern here at Therapy Matters, soon to be a therapist. And a couple nights ago, I gave a webinar on attachment and relationships and wanted to record that so we can put that up on our Facebook page and Instagram and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start this slideshow. Okay. Great. So as you can tell, it's about relationships. I want to say that it can be any type of relationship. It doesn't have to be romantic relationship, but the slideshow is called Who Do We Attract and Why Isn't It Working? So let's go ahead and dive on in. Just a little overview of what I'll be talking about today. So how our upbringing affects how we relate to our present relationships. And again, that's romantic relationships, relationships in family, with friends, with teachers, with professors, whatever it may be. Why learning attachment styles can be helpful in relationship. And then I'll briefly touch upon the struggles of online dating, and then dating, COVID, and attachment, kind of all wrapped into this storm here. Very difficult right now. So the basics, what is attachment? It's kind of this buzzword in therapy. Essentially, it's an emotional bond and relationship with another person. We're really talking about here our early bonds with caregivers and how it has a tremendous impact on a child and how they show up in relationships. So it directly affects how we show up in our relationships today. Okay. Here we go. So there's a lot of studies that have been conducted on attachment. One of the most popular study is called the Strange Situation Study, and that was done in the 70s. And out of this study, they developed attachment styles. So maybe you've heard secure attachment and insecure attachment. So I'm going to go over a little bit about what this study looked at and how they came up with these attachment styles. So in this study, it focused on having a child in a room with their caretaker, whether that's a parent or someone who took care of them, caretaker. And when that caretaker left the room, they were left with a stranger. And when that caretaker came back, so they were looking at how the child reacted to when the caretaker left, how they reacted with the stranger, and how they reacted when the caretaker came back. Okay. So what they found in secure attachment styles in children was when their caretaker left, they became upset, distressed. They had an upset reaction, and they were not comforted by the stranger in the room. When that caretaker came back, they approached that caretaker and they were easily comforted by them. So that's secure attachment, okay? It's kind of its own category. When we talk about insecure attachment styles, we're talking about three. There's ambivalent, there's avoidant, and I know it says disordered, but it's actually disorganized. Let's go ahead and talk about ambivalent attachment. So in this study, when the caretaker left the room, the child became intensely distressed. They were pretty skeptical of the stranger. And when that caretaker came back into the room, the child approached the caretaker, but there was a lot of resistance towards the contact with the caretaker, right? So they approached the caretaker, but they may have even pushed the caretaker away. This kind of ambivalent or this anxious push and pull that they saw. Okay. With children who are identified as avoidant attachment, when the caretaker left the room, there was no distress at all. The child was soothed by the stranger just as easily as they were by the caretaker. Now, when the caretaker came back in the room, the child didn't show any interest. Even in this picture, you can tell that they may have tried to avoid their caretaker when they came back. So lastly, I want to talk about disorganized. So disorganized is this kind of outlier attachment style. So this slideshow will mainly be based upon this book called Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. It's a really great book. It has a lot of tools that you can do at home. But in this book and in other podcasts and reading and journal articles, the attachment styles that are talked about are mainly just secure, ambivalent, and avoidant, because disorganized is its kind of own attachment style. It's less common than the other three. So in this slideshow, I'm going to do my best to talk about it, but I'm going to really just focus on the three that are heavily focused on in other research studies. But in disorganized attachment, when that caregiver left the room, the child became very confused and disoriented. They were not soothed by the stranger. They were just confused. And then when the caretaker came back, they still approached the caretaker upon arrival, but they were really hesitant and when they appeared to be comforted, okay? So they also showed signs of there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of jerky movements, a lot of freezing or dissociation, so a lot of confusion, okay? So I'm going to talk now about each attachment style and how it shows up in children and in adults, okay? And I do want to say that although attachment styles can be so very, very helpful for us, I don't really want to put us in boxes, and I really want to name that there can be a lot of factors that influence how we show up in relationship. So various traumas throughout our lifetime, huge life changes or disruptions, disabilities, there's a lot that come into play. So just keep that in mind as I talk about and go through each attachment style. So when I'm talking about secure attachment, I'm talking about how caregivers are positively attuned to their child. They provide care, they provide attention and affection. Okay, so that directly influences a child. And as a child, because of that positively attuned adult or caretaker, that attention, that affection, children feel really safe in the world. They feel free to engage and interact with others. There is a lot of trust that is there. Healthy relationships and independence are in place, and children have emotional resilience and regulation. So of course, children are going to have outbursts and they're going to have tantrums because they're children, and then they're doing the best that they can. But you know, when an adult who is a secure attachment figure comforts that child and attunes to that child's going to learn how to have emotional resilience and regulation really quickly. As an adult, they tend to have greater confidence. They have a good balance in life in general. The ability to give and receive love. They're usually classified as warm and loving. And I think this one is really most important for me as identifying secure attachment is the ability to communicate needs and read their own needs, the ability to communicate their own needs and read their partner's emotional cues, okay? So they're quite skillful. Let's talk about ambivalent attachment style. It's also called anxious attachment style. So the caregivers are going to be on again and off again. So they're inconsistently attending and attuning to their child. Okay, so this could look like a parent or a caretaker being consumed in their work, and the child coming up and asking them to play, and then providing them attention, and then kind of going back and forth. So the child never really knows when the caretaker is available. This could also look like one caretaker providing a lot of attention and the other one providing neglect. It can show up in a lot of different ways. So as a child, because of this behavior of the caretaker, the child constantly doubts whether their needs will be met, right? If there's a lot of inconsistency, the child's gonna really second guess, well, my mom or my dad or my caretaker gave me that one time, but they didn't the other time, so I'm confused, right? They never know how their behavior will influence a caretaker's response. So because of this, You have children that often act really clingy and desperate, okay? As an adult, their desire to be close to a romantic partner, they have a desire to be close in a romantic partnership, but they fear that their partner does not want to be as close as they want, right? So going back to that on again, off again, they're not really sure. That shows up in their adult world. Relationships consume emotional energy. So kind of a classic example that they talk about in this book is, you know, if you are starting to date someone and you send them a text, they don't respond. You get really, really preoccupied and consumed. Oh, should I send them another text? I wonder why they're not texting me back. Did I do something wrong? Maybe I should send them another text, right? So it's just really draining. They're sensitive to small fluctuations in partners' moods and actions. They take partners' behaviors really personally, overly personally. They get upset and tend to act out, saying things that they may regret. And then I just wanted to say that if a partner is secure, and this is common among all of the attachment styles, but specifically for ambivalent, the ambivalent partner, it's they have the ability to shift into a more secure attachment style. Okay. So when we're talking about avoidant attachment, I think this is like the best picture to describe avoidant attachment. The caregivers are emotionally unavailable. They're insensitive or even have a hostile reaction to a child's needs. Okay, so when I'm talking about what I mean by that is that you know, maybe a caretaker does not show up for their child at all, and they're really focused on them. They're really insensitive. Maybe if a child drops something on the ground and breaks it, they have a really explosive reaction, okay? So as a child, some coping strategies are disconnection, right? My caretaker is not gonna give me what I need, so I'm gonna check out. I'm not gonna be present. Children may appear outwardly calm, but they are emotionally distressed when they're neglected. There's been a lot of studies that show they actually have the same amount of anxiety that ambivalent attachment children have, even if a child is looking like they appear really independent, sitting in a corner, drawing, whatever it may be, but they actually have that same activated nervous system. They also rely on themselves and they suppress their emotions, okay? So imagining what this does to a kiddo's nervous system, right? As an adult, they often feel uncomfortable with too much closeness, right? Like what is that? That's too much. They're always seeking independence and autonomy and prefer these qualities compared to being in relationship. They can often keep their partner at arm's length. They really do anything to keep their partner at arm's length. They come up with excuses, they come up with things that they keep their partners away so they don't feel that intimacy or that connection. They receive complaints from partners that they're too emotionally distant, and they're often looking for signs of clinginess or control. Okay, so obviously you can tell by this screen of just the intensity of the lightning, because disorganized attachment is quite intense, okay? So how this is gonna look from the caregivers are gonna be very critical. They're gonna disapprove constantly. They're offering impossible to resolve situations. And sometimes, I would say more than most, is they involve violence, allowing the caretaker to be perceived as a source of fear. Okay, so as a child, they're exposed to unsolvable situations again and again. So imagine what that creates, these messages in this child's head, right? They develop a pattern of not solving problems, right? I'm unable to do this. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy, right? There's a lot of confusion that emerges when they're thinking about their caretaker, the only person they can rely on, because this is the only person that is really supposed to be taking care of them, but they hurt me. There's a lot of confusion there, right? But they constantly criticize and disapprove of me. I don't get it, right? the child wants to be close to the caretaker, but is typically in a state of fear. So that's where, when I was talking about in the previous slide of that strange situation study, that's where that child, there was a lot of disorientation, a lot of confusion. This is where that comes from, okay? So as an adult, they can typically have very big emotions and often lack coping skills to deal with stress. They yearn for closeness, but have an intense fear of rejection. And that makes so much sense just looking at the way that they were influenced or taken care of by their caretakers. They have difficulty connecting with others. They also may be violent or quick to get angry. So being in a stable and long-term relationship for someone who is disorganized, who has disorganized attachment style, it's going to be really, really difficult because of trust and a lot of difficult strategies that they put into a situation. So self-destructive strategies, I would say. Okay, so want to encourage everyone to take a breath, right? This can feel like a lot. This is a lot. And it can bring up a lot about our childhood. Maybe there's a lot of clicking going on in your head, like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe there's a lot of blame that starts to emerge as we're pointing our fingers at our parents and, thinking of all these situations. But I really just want to say, for the most part, for most of the time here, parents are really doing the best that they can, okay? And that there is no such thing as a perfect parent. That does not exist. There are also a lot of other factors that come into play, like I said before, traumatic situations throughout your life. There's a lot of life changes that can occur. So other things come into play, okay? So we're not here to point fingers. We're really here to understand a little bit more about ourselves and how we can show up in our relationship now, knowing what we may know, okay? Knowing it's really hard to relate with others and having a lot of compassion for ourselves, especially when things just don't make sense in a situation. Like when you're fighting with a partner and you're like, why am I feeling this way, right? A lot of the times it's stemming from these deep wounds of attachment. So really just having a lot of compassion for yourself, okay? So why is this important, right? Really, why is this important in this slideshow? So I want to talk about when there's two people in a relationship, whether that's a romantic relationship, a friendship, whatever it may be, and they have two different attachment styles, it's really important to understand your attachment style and also their attachment style. Because if you have two different attachment styles, we do a lot of this. We can butt heads a lot, and the other person can trigger a lot or bring up a lot in one person, right? So say, and I'll talk about that a little later, but it's really important to have this scope of understanding so that we can really work with what we got. Okay. So just a small list of some differences in attachment styles. So if two people have two different attachment styles, their view of intimacy and togetherness may be really different, right? So someone with an ambivalent attachment style is going to want a lot of closeness. They're going to want, they may seem really clingy because they want. And someone with an avoidant attachment style wants the opposite of that, right? They're going to be completely turned off by that person. There's going to be a lot of conflict that come in. So the way that we deal with conflict, how that arises, is going to be incredibly different in each person. Say someone with a secure attachment style is going to approach a situation where there's conflict in a much different, maybe a kind of calm and thought out manner, where someone in a disorganized attachment style is going to come in and they're going to say, I want to break up, right? Because they just don't know what else to do. In parenting styles, it's going to differ. their ability to communicate their wishes and needs. It's really hard to express what we need. And someone with a secure attachment style is going to have a much easier time with doing that than someone with an insecure attachment style. And then their expectations from their partner and the relationship is different. Okay, so as we understand how we can differ in attachment styles, we really want to deepen and understand more about these styles. So understanding someone else's style, we can then understand and predict people's behavior in relationship, perhaps, right? So a great example of this is if you're on a first date and you can already tell that there's something coming up for you. It's making you feel like this person is putting distance between you, or that they're really preoccupied in a lot of their relationships. Maybe this is not the best person who should be in your life right now, right? Maybe you can understand that this person may do this, this, and this. It's really saving us a headache if you can look at it like that, right? Okay, I'm just reading my notes really fast. Right, and if you're already in a relationship, you can really better understand your partner from a place of compassion, right? You can predict their behavior, like, oh, that makes a lot of sense why they may do this, or, you know, I can really understand where they're coming from now. So understanding these styles really helps a lot with compassion. We can understand how to be a more supportive person for someone else, right? Kind of just what I said. You can deepen intimacy and connection, and this will create more trust in relationship. We can educate others so that we can get our needs met and they can understand what's going on for us, okay? So just as a continuation of understanding attachment styles, we can seek out healthier people in our life, right? We get to choose, we get to have a choice. We can seek out those hidden gems, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but if we can identify someone's attachment style, and we can identify that they're a secure attachment style, we can really hold on to that. And then lastly, we can create a new language, right? So instead of asking, do they like me? We can shift to, is this someone I should invest in emotionally? Are they capable of giving me what I want, right? And we want to be careful about this. We don't want to be too particular, especially if we are, if you do have an avoidant attachment style, but really just opening up more questions like this is going to be really helpful. So this slide was for the webinar, so we're just going to skip that real fast, and we're going to go to this next slide. So now that we know more about attachment style and why it's important to understand them, I want to talk about why it's so easy, or why we so often fall for others who clash with our attachment style, okay? So this slide kind of talks, and I got this from the book as well. This slide talks more about the statistics. So avoidance end relationships more frequently, and that's just a fact, right? So that's leaving them in the dating pool longer and more often. So dating an avoidant, someone with an avoidant attachment style is going to be more common. People with secure attachment style usually don't go through too many partners because they are less likely to be in the dating, so that they are less likely to be in the dating pool, right? Avoidants are unlikely to date other avoidants. This is true for people who are disorganized, or for people who are ambivalent as well. And then I would say all insecure attachment styles typically self-sabotage, where they typically kind of throw themselves under the bus, right? So that they're constantly just reoccurring in this dating pool. Okay. So I want to consider what happens when an ambivalent dates an avoidant. And I'm going to say that this is really common, and that's okay. But I just want to talk about what can happen in that relationship, okay? So ambivalents already have a really activated attachment system, right? Remembering back to the previous slide, in just the way that they're kind of push and pull and really anxious. So when they get mixed messages, it activates that system much more. And it creates this roller coaster ride when the two people get together, right? So when ambivalents are with someone who's an avoidant, they have this really activated attachment system, and because the avoidant triggers that in them, okay? So it's really activated. But then when an avoidant compliments them or does something really nice, say, for someone with an ambivalent attachment style, their heart races, they feel really good, and they say, oh, they like me, right? So, then they get a text, but then they don't get a text, and they're wondering, well, what's going on, right? So they're kind of, like I said, like in this roller coaster. They're getting mixed messages. It's this like really confusing dance. And it's very suspenseful, if you can imagine, right? They anticipate every kind remark or gesture that is reoccurring, so that when something negative happens, they're let down, but then they're like, oh, but when is this next thing going to happen, right? So after a while, they start equating anxiety, preoccupation, obsession, and short bursts of joy with love. Okay, so they're saying this is what love is supposed to be. It's supposed to be all over the place and exciting, and this roller coaster of a ride, right? So we become programmed to search for this when we're searching for someone. We search for this passion, we call it, right? So what happens when we find someone who is actually a secure attachment style? Well, that is going to feel really different, right? Because someone with a secure attachment style is honest, they're straightforward, they're consistent, right? So what is a person who has an ambivalent attachment style going to think? They're going to say, this person is boredom, right? Because they're like, they equate, so their calm attachment equals boredom, right? They're not activated like they were with that other person, and they're going to say, they're not the one. The spark is missing, right? I just find that really, really interesting. So with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, so they are at first attracted to people who are ambivalent because people who are ambivalent give them a lot of love and attention, right? Something that maybe they weren't used to at all because of their neglectful childhood, right? But then they create these thought patterns, okay? When this person gets too close or too intimate, they're not the one, they aren't perfect, there's something missing, I'm a free spirit, my partner is too needy, right? So when affection does happen, they become scared because it's too vulnerable for them. They're not used to that. So they'll often write off their partner, okay? And they give off the sense when a person who has an avoidant attachment style, when they feel independent and powerful, they can have this effect on this other person who has this ambivalent attachment style, or just someone maybe even who has a secure attachment style or partially secure and ambivalent, that they feel really needy and incapable. Okay, so they kind of give off that, they make that, they allow that person to feel that from them. They often don't resolve conflict because it's too intimate, right? It's really easy just to check out. And it's really confusing for partners, right? If you can imagine, because this person might be a really great partner and they might do really incredible things one minute and then just slink away the next without giving any warning or any inclination of why they're doing that. It can be really confusing. And just a word about someone who is disorganized attachment style. So people who have this attachment style can also appear really charming and enticing, right? Unfortunately, they don't keep romantic relationships long because they oscillate between needing and belonging to surviving, right? They're doing anything in their power to survive. So they often act quite erratically, even if the other partner is content in the relationship. Okay. So it is possible to create and work on being securely attached, okay? I also just want to say that we can be a mix of all of these attachment styles, right? I don't like to say that I'm just one attachment style over the other. I actually believe that I have a split attachment style of secure and ambivalent, and I feel different attachment styles with different people because they trigger different things in me, okay? So if we date someone secure, it's possible that the other person in that relationship can also be secure, right? This is not like a linear process. Because when we have a positive and secure relationship, we can heal from trauma, okay? Relationships can create trauma and they can also heal us from trauma. So this relationships are really important. And this can be, and especially in kids, this can be a mentor, this can be a teacher. For adults, it can be the same thing. It can also be envisioning someone who is a secure, or just who does have a secure attachment style, and you can embody them. You can think about, what would this person do, right? It's about practicing this attachment style. You can think about a secure relationship you have with a pet, right? We want to mimic that. Animals are so healing, and that can be another whole presentation. This is also true when it comes to therapy, right? Having a therapist, someone there who is constantly there and supportive, consistently shows up, they can help create a more secure attachment style in that person. We want to also critically view our relationships from an attachment lens, okay? Especially if you're dating and want to know if they would be a good fit. So, yeah, okay. Okay, so when you're on a date, it's going to be really important to determine whether the other person seeks closeness and intimacy, right? Are they seemingly occupied with other relationships in their life? Are they overly sensitive, or are they overly sensitive to rejection? So we want to be thinking about these things so that we can decide and determine, whether we want this person in our life right now, okay? Or like how I can coexist with this person, knowing my attachment style or knowing their attachment style. And it's really, really important to, of course, understand that we're all human, right? And there may be other things going on. Maybe someone's really overprotective of their family, or just not talking about specific relationships because maybe they're a single parent, or maybe they're having a bad day, right? There can be a lot at stake here, or a lot at play here. It's really going to be important to state your needs and use effective communication, especially to assess their reaction to it, right? Because the more that we bring in what we need, and then when we assess their reaction to it, we can understand how they're going to show up for us in relationship. So we want to be genuine and honest about our feelings. We want to focus on our needs, okay? We want to be specific. We don't want to blame. And we want to be assertive and not apologetic, okay? So before I end this presentation, I did just want to say a few words on dating in our digital world, okay? Because it would be silly if I didn't. I wanted to talk about the pros and the cons because I personally found my partner on online dating. So I do think there's a lot of benefit. I do also find a lot of difficulty when dating online, especially when it comes to attachment, okay? So my biggest question in online dating is, how do we determine attachments over the screen? It's very, very challenging. So my thoughts would be to limit the time chatting online. Of course, we want to get to know the person a little bit, but there's a lot of miscommunication that goes on through texting. There's a lot of misinterpretation, right? So communicating with that person and saying, let's meet in person if possible, right? Because right now we're in COVID, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. But people can say things that they wouldn't normally say spontaneously, right? They have this time to look at their phone and think about what they want to type out, right? So they're not authentically represented. And there's also a lot of factors that come into it. Maybe they're not the best at technology. Maybe they work all day and can't text you back. So are we going to think that they're just someone with an avoidant attachment style? Or are they just not able to communicate quickly, like with maybe that aligns with our expectations? It's really difficult to understand that. Then there's ghosting, right? So ghosting is when a person doesn't respond. They just drop off the face of the earth. So that could be someone who's disorganized or someone who is avoidant, but that could also be because there's a lack of empathy and people feel more disposable in this digital dating world, or because they're afraid to speak clearly in person and really state their needs in person. It's a lot easier just to not. Yeah, so I think that is very real right now, and especially in online dating, right? Let's see. Yeah, and I think something so important to consider is, are we just skipping human emotions by not processing like a breakup or a rejection? So say if you go on a date with someone, things are going really well for a date or two, and then you go back, they text you or they ghost you, whatever, but they text you and they say, things aren't really working out, right? So instead of actually feeling and sitting with those intense emotions that can come with being rejected, instead of really feeling sad or whatever you may be feeling, we hop right back on the phone and swipe, right? It's really easy just to bypass that experience. And lastly, we have a lot of options. There's a lot of comparison happening, which really takes away from the spark of in-person or giving someone a chance. It just makes us more choosy, okay? And this is just the surface. I think that there's much more in both of these categories, but I do want to move on to the pros. So yes, we are comparing others, and sometimes quite harshly, but we do then have more people to engage with, right? So this is honestly a great socialization tool, especially for folks who feel not like they're able to socially engage with others. They have a lot of anxiety around that. It helps us engage if we're more introverted, or if we don't live in an area where there's a lot of people, right? It's a great way to meet people if we're living in remote areas, or if we're living in a chaotic and claustrophobic city. There's just so many options and it can feel really overwhelming. So this is a really great way to kind of take your time and sift through these people in this process. There's a safety element to this as well, right? So we can look at someone's profile before we meet them in person. We can say, I don't feel comfortable with this person just by looking at their profile. And then again, just socially, it's really difficult for adults to make new friends. It's really difficult for adults to meet people, especially during COVID. So having this as a tool to meet people is going to be really just a great resource. Okay, and then just lastly, I wanted to touch upon COVID and how difficult this has made dating for so many people. I've been told it's really awkward, especially when you're being intimate, right? So can we meet in this spot? Do you feel comfortable with this? Can we take off our masks? You kind of have to, it's beautiful because you're kind of talking about consent in a way of, going slower and asking, can I take off my mask and kiss you, or whatever it may be. But it's just creating this awkwardness. It's creating it's this more selective component if this person is demask worthy, I've heard, right? And it also just sounds like there's a lot of people who just want to talk online, and that's maybe can be really frustrating for people who actually do want to make connections and meet in person. So dating is now just more exhausting, right? If dating wasn't hard enough, it's just amplified much more because of COVID. Because how do we read facial cues with a mask if we're meeting someone in person? How do you go on a date in the winter time, right? And there's just more people in this dating pool now because this is primarily the way that people are dating during COVID. So it's just a lot. And then again, going back to attachment, right? So are people being avoidant? Are people being disorganized? Or is it just COVID? Are they being picky because they don't want to, meet this person in person, whatever it may be? So it's really thrown attachment styles for a loop when it comes to dating. Okay. So thank you so much for listening. If you're listening to this presentation, if you have any other questions or comments, please reach out to my email. It's provided over here, or go ahead and reach out to Therapy Matters email. Yeah, it's a lot of information. Again, I'm going to really suggest this book to anyone who's interested in this topic and wants to hear more. It's a great tool. So thank you again, and look out for more webinars, and also look out for we're hoping to create a group or space to talk about this in more detail. So stay in touch with Therapy Matters and we can let you know. Okay.